and he indicated another room with a large lineup to see a health official. And I said, thank you very much. I'm going to decline. And he started screaming, you cannot go, you cannot go. And 4 or 5 policemen surrounded me and pushed me into a side room. You cannot blackmail me. You cannot use my medication as a bargaining chip.
Well, let's be frank, folks. Flying into and out of so many Canadian airports these days is a downright hellacious experience. Indeed, recently, Toronto's Pearson International Airport was ranked as the #1 worst airport in the world. From outrageous lineups to lost luggage to dealing with that intrusive, albeit useless app, otherwise known as ArriveCan, airline travel is no longer a matter of flying the friendly skies. Rather, getting on an airplane these days resembles the title of one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, namely Nightmare at 20,000 feet. But what recently happened to 72-year-old Sophia Ruchas is almost beyond belief. You see, Sophia flew into Toronto Pearson from Iceland several days ago, only to be treated like a criminal by Canada Border Service Agency staff and even members of the Peel Regional Police Force. Indeed, she was detained for hours and then served up with hefty fines. As for Sophia's crime, well, she believed that the Pearson Goon Squad did not have a right to see her personal medical records. I know, what a concept. But Sophia, take us back to that day when you touched down at Pearson International. What exactly happened?
I came through and I was not asked to complete that form they give you usually on the phone for purposes of where you went, what you bought, how much money you have spent. And I was surprised, but I went in and I put my passport on the computer, and this time they took a photo ID and he printed out a paper. So I gave it to an officer who was standing there, and he drew 3 pink lines with marker on it, and he asked me to go. So I went towards my suitcases, and another officer stopped me. I don't know who he was, but he stopped me, and he said I had to go to that lineup. And he indicated another room with a large lineup to see a health official. And I said, thank you very much. I'm going to decline. And he said, no, you have to do it. It is mandatory. And I said, am I detained then? And he said, no. So I said, goodbye. And I started walking towards my suitcases. And he started screaming, you cannot go, you cannot go. And 4 or 5 policemen surrounded me and pushed me into a side room. And it was like a passage, really. And I was interrogated there for at least 3 hours. They brought another lady too for the same crime. And they wanted us to give our personal information to health officers. And we refused to do that. So they were threatening us that I can arrest you and I can take your documents by force. You're going to end up with a criminal record. And still we refused to do it. But because of circumstances, I was traveling for 2 days. I missed my flight to Toronto from Munich, and I had to stay in Munich overnight. And the next day they sent me to Iceland, and from Iceland to Toronto. And I was without my medication for 2 days. So I told them my blood pressure is very high. I need to go to my suitcases. And over they told me, it is your choice. You can give us your documents, and then you can go get your suitcase.
This is very crucial. You have medication. It's for blood pressure, I understand. And
Yes.
they weren't at first letting you go to your suitcase to get your medication. Why? What would justify that?
They said, it is your choice not to have it. Give us the documents we want, and you can have it. And I said, you cannot blackmail me. You cannot use my medication as a bargaining chip. And that's how it went for hours. We can arrest you. We can do this to you. We can do that to you. And in the end, I kept telling them, I need someone to take my blood pressure. My blood pressure is very high. In the end, they brought paramedics who confirmed that my blood pressure was very high and I had chest pains and anxiety, but still they wouldn't give me my medication.
And that's amazing, too. The fact that they would let it get to a state where a paramedic had to come in and treat you. And like you said, it's so perverse. They were using your medication as a bargaining chip. Just give us what we want, and then you can take your life-sustaining medicine. I got to tell you, Sophia, if this even happened in a maximum security facility, if they were denying the worst of the worst prisoners their medication as a bargaining chip, all hell would erupt. There would be a royal commission. And yet you are a law-abiding Canadian citizen. You have no criminal record. You are being treated like a criminal. What do you make of this?
It breaks my heart to think, because I always loved policemen. I always stop on the street and tell them I'm so proud of you, because my experiences with police were always the highest. And it breaks my heart because to treat someone like that, it's not just appalling. I cannot believe that Canadian men, Canadian police officers would stoop to that level and treat a senior with so much disregard. I could have died there for all they care.
No.
I just can't find words to explain.
Yeah, and thank God that did not happen. But to add insult to injury, I understand you received a couple of tickets as well. What were those about, Sophia, and what was the dollar amount?
The fines were that I did not cooperate with the Quarantine Act, so I have two fines in the neighborhood of $7,500. And the lady who was with me also, I have a witness for everything I say, because there was another lady there, and we got, both of us, $7,500 tickets.
It's just amazing how much the world is upside down in Justin Trudeau's Canada. You have a convicted terrorist and murderer, Omar Khadr, being cut a check for $10.5 million back in 2016. He's supposedly on a no-fly list, but they don't enforce it. We know, as a matter of fact, he flies around. And yet here you are, a law-abiding, a senior citizen, reliant on blood pressure medicine, and you get detained for hours and hours and then get a $7,500 fine. I don't understand. How were you deemed to be any kind of threat to society? And by the way, we know that Justin Trudeau, he likes to fly off to Costa Rica to go swimming. He's not wearing a mask. I doubt he's dealing with the ArriveCAN and all this other stuff, Sophia. So why is there a double standard at play here?
Well, David, what surprised me is that I had to have a negative rapid test before I left Greece, and I had that. And they never asked me to see it. They never asked me to have a test on arrival. They never asked me why I wasn't wearing a mask, which is mandatory in the airport. They never cared for anything as long as I got this up. I don't know why it is so important. Why should I be under surveillance 24/7?
It makes no sense. And I'll give you another example. If we go to Roxham Road, that infamous border crossing, illegal border crossing between New York and Quebec, we have illegal aliens coming in on a quasi-daily basis. And it doesn't matter if you're vaxxed or not, come on into Canada and get processed. Well, I can tell you, Sophia, we think what happened to you was absolutely egregious. My boss, Ezra Levent, he reacted very angrily when he heard your story. So we are going to pass on your case to the Democracy Fund. They're going to take you under their wing for the Fight the Fines program. So don't worry about paying those tickets. Don't worry about getting a lawyer. We're going to supply you with a lawyer. We're going to fight these egregious fines. What do you think about that, my friend?
I'm very grateful. I really am very grateful. Thank you very much. It is very kind of you. What I want to say to Canadians, it is not enough to know the truth. to understand the truth, to share your truth on our Facebooks with our friends. Now is the time to stand up and fight for the truth, because we are facing an evil that humanity has never faced before. And we are standing on the threshold of history, and God will be our judge. Whatever our choice on which side we stand will be judged by God, because this is horrible. And there are many people who condone it, and many people who respond to me and they say that you deserve what you got. So this is very sad.
Well, we are going to fight for justice for you, Sophia. We have excellent lawyers and paralegals that are part of the Democracy Fund. We will definitely do a follow-up story. I think it's going to be a great victory lap in the months ahead when we do get this in front of a justice, because what they did to you by detaining you and by pressuring you, they created a quasi life and death emergency. You needed that medication. You needed the services of a paramedic, and it's all on them, the so-called border control officers and the police officers, acting ostensibly on protecting Canadian society, and yet look what they did to you. It was the precise opposite. Sophia, last word goes to you, my friend.
What do you want me to say, David? As humans, we have two choices to make. Either we choose to act out of love and kindness and generosity and reverence and live in the light, or we can choose to act out of fear and anger and contentment and willful ignorance and live in the darkness. There's nothing else to choose from. And as I said earlier, whatever the choice is, God will be our judge. Right now, we have to stand up as humans and fight for our rights.
Well, Sophia, we are going to fight for you. And like I said, we're going to follow up on this case. It's one of the most egregious ones we've come across. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David, for inviting me.
Once again, please go to noarrivecan.com. Put your name on the petition. Make a donation if you can. Let's all stand up to this outrageous form of app tyranny.